My accurate 2024 model predicts that JD Vance would defeat Gavin Newsom in a hypothetical 2028 matchup. The latest Substack from SoCal Strategies, our sponsored pollster, shows that Vance leads 3 out of 4 hypothetical 2028 matchups as Trump's popularity soars, new SoCal Strategies poll finds. So the poll was about 656 US adults, was conducted yesterday on December 23rd using Lucid Theorem online panel. It was obviously sponsored by me, collected by Cint. We see that Donald Trump's popularity is +4, so he's at 48% nationally to 44% negative. The transition approval stands at +12, so 50% approval to 38% disapprove. Pete Hegseth's, nomination is only disapproved of by a single point, 32% disapproved to 31% approved. 2028 matchups show JD Vance beating Gavin Newsom by 3 points in the national popular vote. Obviously, a lot of undecided voters. We see that Kamala Harris, on the other hand, has a lot of votes on her side, but Vance is currently sitting at 41%, which means that there are a lot of Harris kind of voters, especially since she just was the Democrat nominee. There's significantly less undecided voters here. We see that 94% of Trump voters and 93% of Harris voters say that they made the right choice. So slightly more Trump voters thought they made the right choice than Harris voters. So really interesting to actually see that take place as of right now. We can see that, obviously a lot of voters are split on the reasons as to why they voted for certain candidates. We see here that with Gavin Newsom on the ballot, we see JD Vance beats Gavin with males by 10 points, only loses females by about 4. You see 18 to 29-year-old voters. Vance outright wins those votes. Same thing with 30 to 44, but loses 65 plus and is tied with 45 to 64-year-old voters. Clearly, still a lot of undecideds. We also see Gavin's only getting 44% of the black vote to JD's 13. Hispanic vote, JD wins by 3 points, wins the white vote by 8 points, and is winning Asian/other voters outright as of right now. He even wins college-educated voters and non-college educated voters as well. He's winning in the Rust Belt. He's slightly losing in the Northeast. He's winning in the South, and he's also slightly losing in the Western side. And we actually see here that 74% of Trump voters are sticking with JD, 19% undecided as of right now. 6 of Donald Trump voters, 6% are actually going for Gavin in this poll, which is really interesting. And then you see Kamala Harris, 7% of her voters are flipping to Vance here. So really interesting stuff in this poll. And we see about 71% of Harris voters would stick with Gavin. And we see people who did not vote. Gavin barely wins that group by 1 percentage point as of right now. And people who voted for someone else, we see break for Vance by quite a substantial amount and are currently undecided here. We see that Gavin is slightly leading with independents, but Vance has a stronger showing with the Republican Party than Gavin does here. So a very interesting note to take. We also see here that with, believe it or not, right now, JD Vance actually has less Republicans on his side than Kamala has Democrats in this poll, which is really, really interesting. You also see people who voted for Donald Trump, 7% of them go for Harris. Meanwhile, you see a couple people who voted for Kamala Harris, only 4% break for JD. So again, really interesting to see how this works out. Even the people who, voted for someone else, 38% of them break for JD Vance, 21% break for Harris. So out of all of the candidates that we put up on this ballot, it actually shows that as of right now, Kamala is the strongest Democrat candidate, but a poll this far out is really only showing the name recognition support of a certain candidate. So this does not mean that Kamala is a shoo-in to beat JD Vance. However, it does show that she does have a better base and name recognition than most other Democrats, but clearly things could change. The percentages are very, very low. But what I will do is I will construct an electoral map based on the demographic information that we got. Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, all of Nebraska, including the 1st Congressional District, which is now in the state Republican column at 15 points. In the 2024 election, it was a 13-point win for Trump. J.D. Vance gains in the 1st Congressional District. Kansas is also in the safe column. It was a 16-point win in the last cycle. Right now, it is a 15.9 percentage point win, so basically identical to what it was. This time, Oklahoma also moves slightly in the Republican direction by about 1.4%. We see the state of Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, all are in the Republican column. Some of these states move Republican. Some of them move like a point or two Democrat because Vance is maxing out with this group in the popular vote and in the Electoral College. He's maxing out with these working class voters. With the certain demographic, he's kind of just maxing out with those voters. So you see some leftward shifts in some states, some rightward shifts. In the state of California, you see a safe margin performance for Gavin, but he underperforms Kamala Harris by 3 percentage points. We also see Washington, he underperforms Kamala by almost 3 points in the state. We also see in other states, for example, like Vermont and Massachusetts, he underperforms in those states compared to Kamala's margin. We see in Vermont, Kamala won by 32. Now it is just a mere 30-point win when rounded out. You see Massachusetts just a 25-point win. It was roughly about the same amount. So it's a slight erosion in the state. The state that does move really far to the right is actually Maryland. And this is kind of due to the black vote. You see Maryland, a 9-point shift in the state of Maryland. So really interesting that J.D. Vance gains a lot in Maryland. District of Columbia is obviously going to be in the safe column. But that's actually it for the safe states, except for the 1st Congressional District of Maine. We actually see that there, a 19-point win for Gavin Newsom, only a 2-point decrease from the 2024 election for Gavin. So if we keep looking at some of these other states, Texas, Iowa, Ohio, and Florida are all in the likely column. Iowa actually slightly goes down for Vance. He underperforms by like 0.7%. Ohio, Vance actually gains quite substantially, gains about 3 points in the state of Ohio. In Florida, he basically matches Trump's margin. It's a very slight, overperformance in the state for Gavin Newsom. Very slight overperformance, but he does end up winning it, showing that he kind of is maxing out with some of these, Hispanic voters. We see Texas is a little bit, almost a point less of a margin for Vance than it was for Gavin Newsom. So there we kind of see that take shape in the state, but they're basically mirroring their 2024 results. South Carolina is also in this Republican column here. It was a 18-point win last time. A slight underperformance for J.D. Vance in the state. Alaska actually moves into the 17-point category win. It was about a 13-point win this time around, but Vance actually does a little bit better in the state of Alaska right now, which is pretty fascinating. And we see in a state like, for example, Oregon, we see about a 12.5-point win. This is a slight decrease, a 2-point decrease from 2024. So J.D. probably improves in the greater Ohio, Idaho area. That's probably where he'd make gains. Colorado is interesting because due to that Hispanic vote shift and the college educated shift, Vance actually wins white college grads by 4 points in this election. So you're going to see the shift in Colorado when that takes place because there are a lot of those type of voters in that state. You see it's only an 8-point win compared to the 11-point win from the previous cycle. So a 3-point decrease for Gavin in the state of Colorado. So really interesting. Colorado kind of moving back to the right here. We also see Illinois, a very slight overperformance for Gavin in the state of Illinois compared to Kamala Harris. Very slight overperformance. He probably gains in some rural counties in Illinois, but continues to slightly lose in the Chicago area. We see Virginia, as of right now, is not even in the likely status anymore. Rhode Island, Connecticut, Delaware. These states, I think, actually end up getting closer. Connecticut gets about almost 3 points closer. Rhode Island, 14-point win. Now it's just 11. We see Delaware, a 12.5-point win here. It was 14.5. So they do end up getting a bit closer here. And a lot of the Northeast, you can see JD makes gains here because of the Catholic vote shift. into the Republican Party. New York also drops into single digits. It is only a 9.3 percentage point win for Gavin. So he does underperform in the state by about 3 points from Kamala Harris. He continues to lose in the New York City area, maybe gains in some suburban areas, but those losses in New York City would continue as of right now, according to this election model. We see in the states of Arizona and Nevada, these are going to be likely Republican states. Arizona was a 5.5-point win for Donald Trump in the last election. We see here just 5.1%. So very similar win. Gavin probably gains very slightly in Maricopa, while Vance gains in some other places like the border in Arizona, but it's basically a wash. It's pretty much the same result. Nevada, on the other hand, is a 7-point win for JD Vance, basically putting it out of the competitive territory. Nevada is almost as Republican as New York, as is blue in the scenario. Maine's 2nd congressional district, a 13-point win in this election as of right now. We come down to the swing states here. We actually see that New Hampshire is exactly a 5-point win for Gavin Newsom. The state has a lot of Boston implants coming in, and somebody like a Gavin Newsom may appeal a little bit more to some of these type of voters than somebody like a Kamala would. So that's why that state ends up becoming more Democrat, but Maine actually shifts a little bit to the right of this cycle here. As you can see, it shifts very slightly, but both of these out of reach for the Republican Party. And here are the swing states: New Mexico. Oh, I actually forgot to fill in Hawaii. Hawaii, funny enough, is actually not even safe. It's only a 9-point win for for Gavin, which is really interesting. Only 9 points. This would be a very alarming shift. I think this is probably overestimating Vance with Asian voters, but we actually see here that it was a 23-point win in the last election cycle. Now it just comes in at 9 points. I don't think this would be the case at all. I am probably overestimating right now, overestimating JD Vance in Hawaii by quite a bit. Even this far out, I probably am. But we see here in the state of North Carolina, as of right now, just a 4.6 percentage point win in the state. So JD would improve from Donald Trump's win by about 1.4% in the state of North Carolina. Georgia, another key battleground, does get closer, but it's basically a wash. It's practically the same result as it was this cycle. State of New Jersey, we actually see here, was a 5.9 percentage point win for Kamala Harris. Here it actually shows up as 3.7 for Gavin. So it's slowly moving into that competitive territory. I wouldn't even be surprised if New Jersey was actually competitive in 2028, depending on the favorability ratings. We even see in the state of Pennsylvania that it is about a 3.2 percentage point win for JD Vance, and that gets him to 270 electoral college votes. He improves in Pennsylvania from Trump's victory by a little bit over 1.5 points. Michigan actually comes in as 3.1% for JD Vance, and Wisconsin coming in at 2.9% for JD Vance. So he improves in the Rust Belt trio. They're all about 3-point wins as of right now. We see Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. Very similar win to 2024, 4.3 percentage point win for Gavin in the district. It was 4.7 for Harris. So very slight shift to the right. Very slight shift in Nebraska at large. New Mexico, just a 1.1 percentage point win. This would be about, give or take, almost a 5-point shift to the right. New Mexico is gaining in Republican registration as of right now. And so this is a big sign for the GOP in the state. I believe that if any of these states were to actually flip into JD's column, because again, guys, the same electoral map never occurs in the history of the United States. Not once has the same exact electoral map happened. I think if JD Vance picks up a state, it's probably going to be from the state of New Mexico. It's on the border. The states are currently moving back Republican. And if those border counties show and Vance gains with those college white voters, it's very possible that he'd actually be able to flip New Mexico into the GOP column. Virginia, another key state, just a 3.2 percentage point win, so it gets slightly closer. More than likely, these rural areas would continue to shift. Maybe some of the urban areas would move right, but that's about it. And Minnesota being the last state we have not filled in, the margin does decrease for Gavin, just 2.6%, but it does stay in the Democrat column. So as of right now, JD Vance gets 312 electoral college votes to Gavin's 226 electoral college votes as of right now. If you guys did enjoy this breakdown from our latest poll, make sure to go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want more content just like this. And we have a GoFundMe to fund polling like this that we want to do in 2025 for the New Jersey, Virginia governorships and the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Hit the like button and subscribe, and we will see you guys very, very soon.